So for those that have followed the woodland escape over the years, you're going to see quite a dramatic change in the landscape. I got myself a lot of brush to get rid of. I just thought I'd show you that before I get into my wee bit of history today. I have a great guest who's visiting us, and we're going to get into a treasure trove, if you would, of information, artifacts, letters. So I think it's human nature that we're fascinated with finding a treasure. I think right from our very youth, when we have our parents reading us bedtime stories about Peter Pan and such things, that's instilled in us. So my guest today was cleaning out a family home in Wisconsin that goes back 4 generations that lived in this home. And he's got it all done. They're going to have a sale of all the furniture and such, and some of it dating right back to the 1600s. This furniture with ties to some rather famous and some infamous people. But the last thing he did was go to the attic. And so he gets in the attic, he finds all these boxes of old letters, and he's in the process of carrying them out to the burn barrel when he thought, I better stop and have a read of some of these. And so he opens up the first one, and he realizes he's holding in his hand not simply a letter from the mid-1800s, but he's holding a book. And he writes a book, which he gifted to me. And we'll get into that when I get down to the cabin. He's down there right now tending the fire. And literally, like I'm reading through his book, and I see it's not just archaeology, it's a conversation through time. We're seeing letters from family members that go well back, artifacts that are, one of them that he's going to share with us today is 275 years old. I mean, you can't get better history than that. And he's tending those fires, I say. I'm going to go down and keep him company, and we'll get into his story. So I'm pretty excited about this guest because we think about all these letters that have been locked in this attic for a century or better, century and a half, just waiting for someone to unlock them and share them with the world. And I'll introduce you to my friend who's going to do just that. And it's interesting because these letters touch on the people that held them, their lives, they tell the story. And this is real history. Hello in the cabin.
Well, hello, Peter.
There he is. Just give me a sec here, Greg. Get rid of that guy. I'd like to introduce Gregg Condon. He's come all the way from Wisconsin to share some history with us.
I'm here to tell you about family artifacts.
And you have got a story. It's interesting too, Greg, that this book, if I may, you sent this to Kathy and I. It says, to Peter Kelly and Kathy, kindred spirits, in reverence to our forebears, Gregg Condon, March 22nd, 2024. Well, what took you a year and a half to find us, Greg? We are in the hinterland, I know.
Well, that. I know. Too many visits to the shooting range with my flintlock Fowler, I think, that would account for
Keeping
that.
busy with the black powder.
Right.
What do they call your nickname? Black Powder Greg?
Or Powderhorn Greg.
Yes. You got to shoot a lot to earn that reputation.
Indeed. I've been at this since I was 17.
You've earned the nickname. So we're going to get into your ancestry, and I understand from perusing the book that you can actually trace your lineage right back to Plymouth Rock.
That is correct. Of my 4 grandparents, 2 came on the Mayflower, had ancestors on the Mayflower. Of my 4 grandparents, 3 had ancestors in the American Revolution. Now, of those 3 ancestors in the American Revolution, my name is Gregg Condon. My Condon ancestors were loyalists, and after the Revolution went to Canada to lived there for a generation until their sons went to Wisconsin as pioneers. And the other 2 grandparents who had ancestors in the Revolution were patriots. And among them were Arnolds. My name is Gregg Arnold Condon. And guess what famous American...
Wee bit of a tie to Benedict.
Yeah, just a bit.
Now, when I
Just a bit.
said both famous people and infamous people,
That
so
is
you've
correct.
You've got it all.
So correct. Benedict had an advantage over Burgoyne at the Battle of Freeman's Farm. He was a relative of the Freeman family. And my grandma's dad's name was Freeman Arnold. So I'm connected to history there. Another great grandma of mine, her maiden name was Allen. And her great grandpa had a cousin by the name of Ethan. Another of her great grandmas was Betsy Jones, whose brother was John Paul. And Betsy grew some flax, spun some thread, wove a tablecloth in the year 1750. And I've spread that tablecloth on your table here today. A mere 275 years old.
And it is sitting right here. And I'll tell you, I am absolutely amazed at the delicacy of this fabric. That she obviously loomed this, but the fact that she grew the flax, threaded it, broke it, wove it, and then made this beautiful tablecloth. So we've got some initials on here. Greg,
yes, the initials are of some of the owners. The top one is B.J. for Betsy Jones. John Paul was empowered by the U.S. Congress to create the Navy. The first ship he commissioned, he
called Betsy.
He morphed from a commercial boat into a U.S. warship, and he named it for his sister, the Betsy.
The Betsy.
And so here's her tablecloth. A few generations are skipped. Betsy Jones was my 5 great grandma. Now, when you do the math of parenting, it's a geometric progression of times 2. We have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents. Well, by the time you get back 5 great-grandparents, there are 128 of them.
Correct, yeah.
So Betsy Jones is one of 64 5 great-grandmas that I or anybody has, but she's the one I know about. This was found in the attic of the family home that my great-grandparents built in the year 1860.
You know, I got to go back to it. I made it look a little weird, but I even love the smell of old things.
Yes.
But to see this grace the table in our little cabin here is something.
Yes.
Maybe we could get into some of these other artifacts. Well, this is a fascinating piece here, Greg. Maybe you can elaborate a little on that guy.
I certainly can. My mother was cleaning out the attic one day, and I found this in a pile of refuse on the back porch. And I said, "Where did you get that?" She said, "Well, that's your old Davy Crockett toy plastic horn. I'm throwing it away." I said, "That's a real horn. Look, it's a real hand-carved wooden end. It has 4 hand-forged nails holding it in. It has been scraped to make the ring for the carrying strap. That is a real powder horn." We investigated, we put our heads to it. It had to have been my great-grandfather Francis Smith's.
There we go. So, Greg, a real passion of mine is birch bark canoe building.
I understand.
And I think I still got 1 or 2 left in me. I've built a few. I'm absolutely fascinated by this piece because this is done traditionally. It's a little out of scale, but I don't think the artist was trying to make a reproduction so much as a model. But we can tell by the stem designs that probably Chippewa. They've actually used cedar ribs. Now, he didn't put as many in. There'd be about 3 between each if it was, you know, to scale. But it's got headboards, hardwood thwarts, inner and outer gunnels. It's pretty much continuously laced. Except where the actual ribs go. Anyway, it's an absolutely fascinating piece, right down to pitching it with natural pitch. So you got to tell me the history. How did it come to end up in your ancestors' attic?
All right. Well, as a little boy, I would see this in the attic from time to time, and I'd say, "Mom, can I play with the toy canoe?" And she'd say, "No, it's a very valuable historical piece." And the same great-grandfather who had the groceries, had a grocery store, the same fellow, Francis Smith, who owned the powder horn.
Okay.
In 1860, he and my great-grandma opened a grocery store in Broadhead, Wisconsin. In that year, a band of Indians came in. They were doing an annual migration along the Sugar River. Other locals historians have told me they think that the last year of that annual migration was 1865, before they gave up those traditional habits. But in 1860, a band of Indians came into the grocery store, traded this for groceries. My great-grandpa was so intrigued with it, he placed a string on it that you're examining, and he hung it up in his store for display. It hung there until he died in the year 1882. So this canoe hung in the store for 22 years. He died at age 60 in 1882, and at that point, his wife, my great-grandma, sold the store and placed this canoe in the attic.
In the attic.
And it stayed in the attic from 1882 until I sold the home at auction in 1997.
So 120 years?
115 years.
Yeah.
This didn't see the light of day or the touch of human hands. It's pretty much intact, inviolate, really, as the Indians presented it to him.
Now, some of those letters that you talked about, you made reference to, or in them they talk about natives coming through and playing together and such. You were relating the story to me last night over the campfire.
Oh, yes. Another great-grandfather wrote about the Indians coming through in the same annual migration along the Sugar River that produced this to Francis Smith. That was a great-grandfather, Condon, wrote in the 1930s. As an old man, he wrote a story for the newspaper about his childhood, and he, referring to the around 1850, he said that like wildfire would spread the excitement and the gossip among the farm community that the Indians were passing by. And he said a carnival-like atmosphere would pervade the community, and everybody would show up at the river where the Indians were camped. And there was much conversation, there was much trading, maybe things like this canoe or tomahawks or who knows were traded.
You mentioned the children would play with one another.
Yeah, and he said that as a little boy in the 1850s, he and the other white children would play with the Indian children.
Okay, Greg, last but not least, I'm handling these with kid gloves because the leather's a little crisp, shall we say, but a very familiar sound for Kathy and I, because we farmed with horses for 4 years.
Yes.
And we'd bring the wood out in the winter in bobsleds, and they had the bells on, but they didn't sound quite as pretty as that.
They've improved with age, I suppose.
I'm thinking, yeah. So a little bit of the history.
My great-great-grandparents, Condon, came from Canada to Wisconsin in 1836. I think the white population of Wisconsin then was about 3,000 people. And these were Nathaniel Condon's sleigh bells. My dad gave them to me for Christmas one year when I was middle-aged, and it meant the world to me to have the sleigh bells of my great-great-grandfather. Dad said they may have belonged to Nathaniel's father, which would be Thomas Condon, the fellow who fought in the Revolution. They could be as old as the generation of the American Revolution who had these.
Fascinating. You know, we think about, you're talking about ancestors, so you've got Tories moved to Canada, New Brunswick at the start, and ultimately end up in Wisconsin, but or their children. But it was actually the first Civil War. It wasn't just a war against Britain. You had family that experienced that, you know, that brother against brother, father against, you know, father sort of thing, and
absolutely.
That's what America was. That's what the American Revolution was.
I've always looked at it that way, as much a civil war as anything. Mm-hmm. And in that generation, my Condon ancestors were loyalists, and the other two great-grandparents were patriots, and who knows, I might have had ancestors actually fight against each other, and then all end up being pioneers in the same place in Wisconsin, or their children were.
Anyway, Greg, this has been amazing. We're here for another night. We're going to sit around a campfire. I wish we could tell all the stories, but you're going to tell most of them to me this evening, so
absolutely.
make sure you got some water so you throat doesn't get dry, and I appreciate you taking the
Oh,
time,
it's
Greg.
been a pure pleasure.
It's been
Get me
fascinating.
talking history and you don't get me to stop.
There you go. You know, you think about, I've always thought about genealogy. Like, I know mine back to a certain extent. I sort of run into a dead end. I think records got destroyed in Ireland. But it's one thing to know your family tree, but few of us have the privilege that you have to really be able to delve into that history of your family, and that's fascinating.
It has enabled me to feel like I know them, not
Yeah.
just an abstract name on a list.
I look forward to our fire tonight.
Me too.